You're listening to Overhead Story Channel. Enjoy.
You ever have one of those moments that feels like the ground shifts under you, but no one else notices? Like the world tilts 10 degrees and you're the only one sliding toward the edge? It started with a phone call I wasn't supposed to answer. It was a Thursday. Midday. I was eating leftover pasta at my desk, half watching a video about client retention that I'd already tuned out. I remember thinking how normal the day felt. Just another gear turning in the machine of life. Nothing special. Until my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Usually I ignore those. I don't pick up unless I'm expecting a call or recognize the number. But something in me it wasn't even conscious said, pick it up. So I did. Hi, is this Mr. Callahan? The voice asked. Yeah, I replied, glancing at my screen. This is Greg from Night Bloom Couriers. I've got a bouquet here for Naomi Callahan and I've tried twice now to deliver it to her office. The problem is, the receptionist said not to disturb the couple upstairs. Thought I'd check with you before leaving it at the front desk. There were a lot of words in that sentence, but only one stuck in my mind, couple. I sat perfectly still, my fork hanging midair. The couple upstairs? Yeah, that's what the front desk told me. Her car's in the lot, but they said not to ring the office or interrupt them. Sorry, man, just doing my job. I don't remember what I said next. Something polite. Something forgettable. I think I told him I'd handle it. When the call ended, I stared at my phone for a few seconds. Then I stood up, grabbed my keys, and left work without saying a word. She was supposed to be in Denver. Business trip. Left early that morning, 6:15 a.m., coffee in hand, suitcase by the door, blazer pressed sharp. Kissed me on the cheek and promised to text when she landed. That text never came. I'd noticed around mid-morning, but I figured she was just busy. It didn't raise any alarms. But now her car, our car, technically was parked in the lot behind her building. I told myself it had to be a mistake. Maybe she missed her flight. Maybe her meeting got moved. Maybe she came back and forgot to tell me. The logical part of my brain started assembling excuses like bricks in a wall, trying to keep the rising unease out. But the cracks were already forming. I pulled into the lot 20 minutes later. There it was, her white Civic. Same cracked bumper. Same faded parking permit dangling from the rearview mirror. Parked exactly where she always parked. No Denver. No business trip. I stood there in the car for a moment, staring at it. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight they hurt. The building was mostly glass, new, corporate, sterile. I'd only been inside twice. Once for her promotion party, once to drop off her lunch when she forgot it. I remembered how proud she looked when she gave me a quick tour, how she pointed out her new office upstairs with the big windows and corner view. The receptionist barely looked up when I walked in. Hi, I said, trying to sound casual. I'm here for Naomi Callahan. I think she's expecting flowers. She glanced at a clipboard. Oh, she's upstairs, but they asked not to be disturbed. They? I asked. She's with someone? The receptionist gave me a quick, polite smile. Yes. A couple from marketing. They said it's a private client consult. I thanked her even though my stomach was in knots and walked toward the elevator. Then I doubled back and took the stairs. I didn't want to announce myself with a ding and sliding doors. I climbed 3 flights slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the top, I moved quietly down the hallway, my shoes muffled by the carpet. At the end of the corridor, I saw it, the faint glow from her office. One of the corner rooms. Lights still on. The blinds were halfway open. I don't know what I expected to see. Maybe her at her desk on a call. Maybe a group of coworkers gathered around a laptop. But what I saw was her, Naomi, in someone's arms. He was tall. Short dark hair. Maybe early 40s. I couldn't make out much detail. But his hands were on her waist and her face was tilted up toward him. Close. In asterisk mate. I froze. My breath caught in my chest and my pulse thundered in my ears. For half a second, I told myself maybe it was innocent. Maybe he was comforting her. Maybe someone died. Maybe anything. But she wasn't crying. She was smiling. And then she saw me. Our eyes met through the glass. Her expression flickered, not shock, not guilt, just recognition. Then calm. Like flipping a switch. I backed away instinctively, almost stumbling into the wall behind me. She emerged seconds later, smooth and composed like nothing had happened. Hey, she said, closing the door behind her. What are you doing here? I got a call from a courier, I said. My voice sounded too low, too far away. He said the flowers were for you, but they wouldn't let him in. Said a couple upstairs didn't want to be disturbed. She blinked, then laughed softly. Oh, that? Yeah, no. The flowers are for Evan's wife. He's going through a rough divorce, and I told him sending flowers might help ease the tension. I helped him order them. Guess it got messy with the delivery. That's all. I looked past her toward the man still standing inside her office, now pretending to study a file on her desk. That was Evan? I asked. She nodded like it was nothing. Yeah. Poor guy. Been a mess for weeks. I've been helping him figure out how to settle things amicably. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. Her tone was so confident. Casual. Like I was overreacting. Like I'd interrupted a therapy session instead of something in asterisk mate. She stepped closer. Mark, come on. You think I'd cheat on you in my office? In broad daylight? She smiled as if the idea was absurd. Really? I didn't answer. I didn't know how. I should have texted, she added. Flight got canceled. I figured I'd just come in and catch up on reports. Didn't think it was worth making a big deal about. Sorry. She touched my arm gently. Let's go home. You look stressed. She walked ahead, cool and collected, like nothing was off. Like she hadn't just been caught with a man's arms wrapped around her like they did it every day. And I, like a fool, followed her. The whole ride home, she talked about trivial things. The flight. The cold weather in Denver. How she might have dodged a snowstorm. She made a joke about me showing up with flowers and how I must have looked like a rom-com character barging in. I didn't laugh. When we got home, she made dinner. Chatted about work. Asked about my day. Not a trace of guilt in her voice. And yet something in me had changed. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe in the woman I married. But the image of her in that office wouldn't leave my head. The way she turned when she saw me. Not panicked. Not ashamed. Just calculating. I didn't sleep much that night. I stared at the ceiling for hours, her breathing steady beside me. Her story looped in my mind like a rehearsed script. Confident. Casual. Bulletproof. But deep down, something had shifted. I didn't know it then, but that was the first crack in the glass. After that night, things didn't return to normal, not really. On the surface, everything looked fine. She still made her coffee the same way in the morning, still asked if I'd seen her favorite earrings, still left post-its on the fridge reminding me to pick up dog food or eggs. But there was a fracture now, a fault line under the floorboards of our routine. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. At first, I convinced myself I was imagining things. That maybe I was being dramatic. One weird hug didn't equal a full-blown affair. Right? But my brain had already started sorting through the debris. Like a forensic analyst combing through old footage, I began rewinding moments I'd once written off. Naomi had been different for a while. I just hadn't let myself notice. It was little things at first, things I chalked up to stress or work overload. She'd become more attached to her phone. I mean, she always used it, who didn't? But now she guarded it like it was a limb. Always on silent. Always face down. She never left it charging out in the open anymore. If I so much as glanced at it while it buzzed, she'd scoop it up with this light, practiced motion and say, just work stuff. She took more calls behind closed doors too, usually in the bathroom or out on the balcony. I'd hear her laugh, low and quiet, a sound that once made me feel lucky. But lately, it made my chest tighten. One night, she said she had a college reunion to attend. It was last minute, supposedly something one of her old roommates had put together. I asked if I could come just out of curiosity. She brushed it off. It's just a few of us girls catching up, she said. You'd be bored to death. Plus, it's at some wine bar downtown. Super girly. Don't torture yourself. That night, she left the house in a Berg *NY dress I hadn't seen before. Hair curled. Perfume I hadn't smelled in a while. It was the kind she used to wear when we first started dating. Nostalgic and sweet. I smiled and kissed her goodbye, but something inside me shifted. A tiny voice, somewhere deep and unwelcome, whispered she's not going where she says she is. She didn't come home until after midnight. When I asked how it went, she smiled thinly and said it was fine, then disappeared into the bathroom. She didn't offer details. Didn't show me pictures. When I checked social media the next day, I didn't see her tagged in any photos. None of her college friends had posted about the night at all. It was like it never happened. That's when I started writing things down. Not because I wanted to trap her. Not at first. But because I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. I needed proof that I wasn't making things up. That I wasn't being the paranoid husband inventing shadows in the corners. I made notes of when she said she'd be out. When she came back. Who she said she was with. What she wore. Her mood before and after. Just data points, just dots. But the more I recorded, the more those dots started to connect. Her overnight trips increased too. Always exactly 2 nights. Never longer. At first, they were for work conferences. Then client meetings. Then training retreats. I asked once why they always seemed to fall midweek. She shrugged. That's when hotel rates are cheapest. Company policy. She always came back with stories, funny little anecdotes, inside jokes about coworkers I'd never met. But sometimes she'd return overly energized, buzzing, like someone high on something. Other times she came back depleted, like she'd run a marathon. No middle ground. One morning, after one of these trips, she greeted me with a kiss and poured herself coffee. I leaned in for a hug and caught a whiff of something cologne. Expensive. Not mine. I asked, half joking, "You smell different. Did your hotel have a new shampoo or something?" She blinked, then laughed. "Oh, yeah, probably. Or maybe I brushed up against someone in the elevator. You know how tiny those things are." It was the same tone she used when she explained the flowers in her office. Smooth, casual, confident, the kind of lie that's been practiced more than once. Then came the purchases. We'd always kept our finances transparent. A shared budget. Joint accounts. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. I'd set up notifications for our credit cards years ago, mostly for fraud protection. One day, I got a ping for a $600 charge at a boutique I didn't recognize. I checked the location. It wasn't local. I waited until she got home to ask. "Oh, that?" "Yeah," she said, waving her hand. "It's a new workwear line they're piloting. My boss said it'd get reimbursed as part of the new branding initiative." I nodded slowly. "Through your bonus account?" "Yep. It won't show up on the regular payroll." "Don't worry." But I did worry. I pulled up our investment accounts that weekend. The one we'd agreed to never touch unless it was for something big: down payment, emergency, maybe adoption one day. We'd been building it for years. A chunk of it was gone. Not all of it, but enough to leave a dent. There was no record of a withdrawal. No reimbursement trail. Just missing money. When I brought it up, she said it was being moved to a different fund, something her firm had advised. "You don't need to stress over it, Mark," she said. "It's all under control." But it wasn't. I didn't say anything then. I told myself I needed more. I needed something undeniable. Because despite everything, the lies, the inconsistencies, I still wanted to believe there was a version of this that made sense. That I was overreacting. That I wasn't watching the slow erosion of my marriage. One day, I came home early from work. Just a random Friday where everything felt off. Her car was already in the driveway, which was odd. She'd told me she had meetings all afternoon. I walked in and found her sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by paperwork. She looked up, startled. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said. "Canceled meetings." "What's all this?" She smiled, quick and tight. "Just work stuff. Sorting some tax forms. Want a beer?" I noticed one thing immediately. She'd already poured 2 glasses of wine. "Expecting company?" I asked, nodding toward them. "Oh," she said. "That's mine." I couldn't decide between red or white. We both knew she only drank 1 glass, never 2. But she handed me the red like it meant nothing. That night I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry. Not even because I felt betrayed. Because I still didn't know the truth. And not knowing, it was worse than anything. I started losing time. Not literally, but mentally. I'd sit in meetings and realize I hadn't heard a word. I'd reread the same email 3 times before understanding it. I started snapping at people who didn't deserve it. My coworkers noticed. My sister called one night just to say I sounded off. Naomi noticed too. "You seem stressed lately," she said one night as we watched TV, her head on my shoulder. "You okay?" "Work." I lied. "Just work." She kissed my cheek and went back to the show. And I sat there, watching her out of the corner of my eye, wondering who she really was when I wasn't around. One night, I found her laptop open. She was in the shower. I didn't mean to snoop. I really didn't. But the screen was on an email tab, and my eyes locked on a name I didn't recognize. She'd written, "See you soon." Same place? With a smiley face. I closed the laptop before I could read more. My heart was pounding. My hands were shaking. Still, I didn't confront her. Because I needed more. Because I still wasn't sure. Because love makes you hesitate long after logic tells you to run. I didn't want revenge. Not yet. What I wanted was the truth. And I was getting closer. I didn't sleep the night I saw the email. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling while the faint hum of Naomi's breathing pulsed beside me. I kept hearing that line again and again. "See you soon." Same place? The next morning, I was up before the sun. I stood in the kitchen holding a coffee I never drank, feeling like I was standing in someone else's house. Naomi floated in an hour later, yawning, her hair a tangled mess, wearing the same sleep shirt she'd worn since college. Navy, soft, torn at the hem. For a second, I almost forgot. For a second, I almost leaned in to kiss her. Then I remembered the email. "Morning," she said with a stretch. Smells like fresh coffee." I said nothing, just handed her the mug and smiled. I'd gotten good at smiling. Something had changed inside me. The part that wanted to believe, wanted to give her another chance, wanted to explain everything away, was dying. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I wasn't sad either. I was sharp, focused. I needed to know. No more guessing. No more gut feelings. I just needed the truth. And I knew exactly who to call. Dylan wasn't just a friend. He was the kind of guy people referred to as a little too good with computers. In college, he'd built a fake parking system just to prank campus security. Now he worked in cybersecurity, the quiet kind, the government contractor kind. When I explained my situation, he didn't ask many questions. He just nodded and said, "How much do you want to know?" "Everything," I replied. "But nothing illegal. I don't want spyware. I just want clarity." He came over that weekend. Naomi said she had a wellness retreat with coworkers. Spa in the mountains. Girls only. Of course she did. While she was gone, Dylan helped me install a silent tracking system on the old MacBook she rarely used anymore, but occasionally left logged into her shared accounts. We mirrored her GPS history. We mirrored her email. Not to read it, just to see if anything was being sent or deleted. We checked logins, passwords, cloud backups. We didn't break in, we followed the breadcrumbs she left behind. Took less than 5 days to get what I needed. The photos were time-stamped, clear, precise. Naomi, my wife, was not at a retreat in the mountains. She was at a condo in a different part of the city. One I didn't recognize. A one-bedroom, high-rise, rented under a fake name. We got a match from her GPS log and cross-referenced it with a property database. The tenant on record? Nina Caldwell, Naomi's mother's maiden name. That alone could have been a coincidence. But then came the camera footage. We'd installed a wide-lens motion-activated cam in my car's dash a few weeks earlier when someone broke into a neighbor's garage. I hadn't checked it since. Dylan showed me how to pull location data from the camera. Turns out, Naomi had borrowed my car one evening. Said hers was acting up. The footage showed her pulling into a parking garage I'd never seen before. Time-stamped 7:52 p.m. 2 hours after she told me she was grabbing dinner with coworkers. The same garage connected to the building registered to Nina Caldwell. Then I saw him. Tall, clean-cut, late 30s. A little gray at the temples. Same guy from her office. The Evan she'd claimed was going through a divorce. The man who sent flowers, who comforted her in an office while I stood outside like a ghost. Only now he wasn't comforting her. He was waiting, holding the elevator, smiling when she walked in. They kissed before the doors closed. The footage ended. I just sat there, staring at the black screen, the cursor blinking like a metronome counting down the seconds of my old life. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. I think that bothered Dylan. "You good, man?" he asked gently. I nodded once. "Yeah, I'm good." But I wasn't. I was done. I had the proof. The affair wasn't a maybe anymore. It wasn't a feeling. It wasn't something I could dismiss or rationalize away. It was real. A fully formed second life she'd built under my nose. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came 2 days later. Dylan found files. Documents Naomi had copied from my personal folders. Financial reports. Password logs. Real estate papers. Stuff that I never shared with her, but that she had access to when we were building our future. First, I thought it was curiosity. Maybe she was planning for a split, getting her ducks in a row. But no, they were using it. She and Evan, her colleague, had laid out a rough plan in a series of encrypted messages Dylan managed to parse. There were notes about transferring funds, diversifying accounts, opening a new LLC. In Belize, there were even comments on timing. Once Q2 closes, we can initiate the shift. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning a full-scale escape. and they were using my resources to fund it. I sat in my garage that night, staring at my old toolbox, hands curled into fists. But I didn't throw anything. I didn't punch a wall. I didn't cry. Something in me had gone cold. Not numb, focused. She wasn't my wife anymore. She wasn't Naomi. She was an operator, a strategist, a hostile agent embedded in my life, wearing my shirts, sleeping in my bed, laughing at my jokes like nothing was wrong. And Evan? He wasn't just some office fling. He was the co-conspirator, the architect of something far uglier than lust. I knew then I couldn't confront her yet, not without understanding the full scope. I needed to know how deep this went, how long it had been happening, what else they'd touched. I needed to isolate the damage before taking any action. I told Dylan to set up a private data vault. Every email, every document, every GPS point, all time-stamped, cataloged, and backed up. If I was going to take them down, I wasn't going to rely on confrontation or moral outrage. I was going to use evidence, strategy, precision. Naomi returned from her retreat on Sunday night. I was sitting on the porch when she pulled up, her duffel bag slung over her shoulder, sunglasses on despite the fading light. She smiled when she saw me. "Hey, you didn't have to wait up. Figured I'd say hi before you passed out from all that pampering," I said. She laughed. "Oh God. I need a detox from the detox. They had us doing yoga at 6 a.m. I'm sore in places I forgot existed." She kissed my cheek. I let her. We went inside. She told me about a woman named Priya from HR who got caught vaping in the sauna. I nodded, sipped my tea, and pretended to care. She smelled like the same perfume from that night, the one I hadn't smelled since she left for her college reunion. I watched her unpack, shower, brush her teeth. I watched her climb into bed, wrap herself in a throw blanket, and drift off like she didn't have a second world burning just outside the reach of my sight. I didn't say anything, because now I understood. This wasn't about love, or lust, or even betrayal. This was a plan, executed in stages, hidden behind routines and smiles and plausible explanations. And I wasn't going to walk away from it with just a broken heart. No, this had become something else. It wasn't a marriage anymore. It was war, and I was done playing defense. You think you're ready for the next move. After the lies, the evidence, the heartbreak. You think you've seen the worst of it. But betrayal has layers, and the deeper you dig, the darker it gets. 3 nights after Naomi returned from her spa retreat, I went into the garage to fix a loose shelf. Something mundane. Something normal. I remember thinking how absurd it was that I was still pretending to care about a shelf when my life had already collapsed. It was around 9:30 p.m. The neighborhood was quiet. Naomi was upstairs, probably texting Evan on her hidden app or playing her role as the exhausted wife just well enough to keep the walls from caving in. I didn't care. I had other things on my mind, like how to move the rest of our funds without triggering a notice, or which legal protections I needed to finalize before launching what I'd started calling the exit sequence. I was bent over the workbench when I heard something shift behind me. A breath. A scrape. Too soft to register if you weren't expecting it, but I was on edge. Always had been since the night I saw her in his arms. I turned fast, and that's probably what saved me. The figure lunged, swinging a short, heavy object. It missed my temple by inches and slammed into the side of a metal cabinet. The sound was loud, crude, like a car wreck in miniature. I stumbled backward, my adrenaline spiking, my mind going completely quiet. I didn't see his face, but I didn't need to. He was built like a runner. Lean. Fast. A half-second too slow. I grabbed the closest thing I could, an old socket wrench, and swung hard. It connected with something soft. He staggered but didn't drop. He backed up, clutching his arm. I raised the wrench again, but he didn't come closer. He just looked at me for a beat too long, like he was memorizing something. Then he turned and ran. Slipped out through the side door before I could get my breath back. I didn't chase him. I didn't call the police either. Instead, I locked the door, stood in the middle of the garage, and tried to slow my heart. Every breath tasted like rust. I stared at the dented cabinet and the socket wrench in my hand, still slick from where I'd hit him. It was him. Evan. I hadn't seen his face, but the build, the posture, the same from the security footage. The way he moved. The way he didn't say a word. It was him. He wasn't there to scare me. He thought I wouldn't see it coming. I went inside. Naomi was on the couch in leggings and a hoodie, scrolling through something on her phone like nothing in the world had changed. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Dropped a tool." "Loud?" She smiled and went back to her screen. I sat across from her and watched her for a while. Not in a romantic way. Not like a husband trying to reconnect with his wife. I studied her. Like a stranger. Like a problem. Her fingers moved quickly on her screen, thumb flicking upward in practiced rhythm. The couch lamp cast soft shadows on her face. The same face I used to fall asleep beside. The same face that had lied to me with such perfect ease. She had no idea what just happened. Or maybe she did. That's what really struck me, the calmness. If she had sent him, if she'd known about it, wouldn't she be more tense? Wouldn't she flinch when I came back in? Wouldn't she ask more questions? But no. She acted like everything was fine. And maybe in her mind it was. Maybe she thought the plan had worked. That Evan had handled the loose thread. I didn't speak. I just nodded occasionally as she talked about some video she watched. She laughed once, showing me a meme. I chuckled back. I was watching a performance. A carefully rehearsed illusion. And now I was part of it too. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I told her I had work to catch up on and stayed in the study. I waited until the house was still, then replayed the garage scene over and over in my head. I hadn't seen his eyes. Just a glimpse of his outline. But that was enough. The way he ran, the height, the silence, it all matched. It wasn't a robbery. Nothing was taken. No words were spoken. He didn't want to scare me. He wanted me gone. And that told me everything I needed to know about the stage they were in. They weren't planning the betrayal anymore. They were executing it. That changed everything. I stopped thinking like a husband. I started thinking like a tactician. I began drawing boundaries between my old life and the shell I now inhabited. I created burner accounts. Rerouted funds. Started severing the parts of our lives that made me vulnerable. Bank accounts. Joint logins. Shared subscriptions. Cloud storage. Everything we'd built together became a map of targets to erase or reassign. I even bought a second phone. Paid in cash. No linked accounts. I didn't install any social apps. Just a few encrypted tools Dylan recommended and a set of numbers for one thing only, clean separation. Then I moved on to something else. Information control. Naomi couldn't know what I knew. She couldn't suspect the scale of what was coming. The moment she caught wind of it, she'd adapt. And Evan, he seemed the type who'd run fast and leave nothing behind. So I smiled more. I brought her coffee in bed. I texted her little jokes during the day. I even suggested a weekend getaway to rekindle things. And she actually looked panicked for a second before smiling. "Oh," she said. "That sounds amazing. But things at work are so insane right now." Of course they were. The next week, I planted the seed. "I've been thinking about switching banks," I told her over dinner. "Ours is getting sloppy with fraud alerts." She barely looked up from her phone. "Do whatever you think is best." That was the only green light I needed. I moved the last of our shared funds into a separate account under my name. I rerouted direct deposits. I even opened a business line of credit, completely separate from anything she'd see. I told her I was working on a side project with some former colleagues. She nodded, distracted, and went back to her salad. Naomi was already halfway out the door in her mind. I could feel it. She had emotionally unplugged months ago. The version of her still sleeping in our bed was a placeholder. A distraction while the real plan unfolded somewhere else, behind burner phones and encrypted drives and a rented condo under a false name. But now the timeline had changed. They'd tried to eliminate the variable. And that made me dangerous. I started tracking Evan. Not directly, I wasn't stupid. But I used every bit of data Dylan and I had collected to start mapping his habits. Gym, office, his other car. He had a secondary vehicle, an older model SUV registered to a holding company. Classic tactic. He also had debts. A lot of them. Buried beneath shell accounts and mid-level transfers, but they were there. Credit cards with minimum payments. Loans marked as revolving. Nothing criminal, just messy. That gave me an idea. I didn't want to confront them. I didn't want violence. I didn't want drama. What I wanted was control. What I wanted was leverage. So I stopped reacting. And I started building. I called it the quiet project in my notes. It wasn't revenge. Not exactly. It was response architecture. It was structure. Because I wasn't going to let Naomi and Evan write the ending to this story. I was going to build a better one. From the inside. One quiet piece at a time. There's a unique kind of clarity that comes after someone tries to erase you. Not metaphorically, actually. That night in the garage was my turning point. Afterward, I stopped thinking like the betrayed husband and started thinking like something else. Something colder. More deliberate. It wasn't about rage. Rage is messy, loud, predictable. What I felt was still, measured, focused. They thought I was a pawn, an obstacle to sweep aside so they could ride off into whatever new life they'd been building behind my back. A condo, a fake name, a passport plan, and a handful of stolen documents. They thought I'd either panic, lash out, or disappear. They didn't expect I'd build. And I did. Quietly, methodically, like a man pulling threads from a suit he used to love. The first thread was financial. Naomi and I had a shared portfolio. Stocks, a few ETFs, a safe spread of retirement and real estate contributions. Over the years, I'd handled most of it. She showed interest when things were good, but never dug too deep. I played into that, kept her looped in just enough to seem transparent while slowly severing the cables. Within a week, everything that wasn't nailed down legally was moved. I created protected accounts under my name, established a trust with an ironclad clause she couldn't touch, and froze our shared access. Officially, it looked like a market safeguard, reactive portfolio adjustments in response to instability. She didn't even blink when I told her over breakfast. "Oh, makes sense," she said, scrolling through her phone. "It's been crazy lately." Next was the legal thread. I hired a lawyer, not the high-profile billboard kind. A quiet operator. Someone Dylan found recommended in hushed tones through encrypted chat rooms. A guy named Porter. Old school. Private office. Didn't advertise. When I laid everything out, photos, financial tampering, the attempted garage assault, he listened without interrupting. Finally, he looked at me and asked, "You want to destroy them or just extract yourself clean?" I thought for maybe 5 seconds. "Both," I said. He nodded like that was the right answer. We began restructuring the marital assets under what's called a pre-divestiture realignment. It's legal. Boring. Invisible if done right. Porter was a master at it. Naomi had no idea she was slowly being written out of our shared life, one signature at a time. I also started digging into Evan's finances. Public records. Property logs. Credit markers. Dylan did most of the heavy lifting, and what he found was gold. Evan was in over his head. Private loans from second-tier lenders. Credit consolidation under shady umbrella groups. Even a co-signed lease on a second apartment, not the one he shared with Naomi. It looked like he'd been preparing for multiple lives. Safety nets. Escape routes. But each one was a pressure point. All I had to do was push. I made a few anonymous calls. Used spoofed numbers rerouted through burner lines. Told one of the lenders that Evan's employment had been falsified. I hinted at identity fraud to another. I submitted a quiet alert to a property manager about suspicious activity at his condo. The debt collectors came first, then the eviction notice. One thread after another pulled loose. While all this happened, I maintained the illusion. I played the role. Loving, tired husband. Occasionally forgetful. Sometimes clumsy. Still trying to fix things. Naomi didn't suspect a thing. She started going out less. I think she assumed the plan was in motion, like they were coasting toward the finish line. I even overheard her on the phone once, whispering, "Just a little longer, it's almost done." Almost done, indeed. The next move was digital. I flagged every device Naomi used, her phone, her tablet, even the smartwatch she synced to her work email. Not to monitor, but to isolate. I created automated alerts to notify me whenever certain patterns triggered: VPN usage, unfamiliar logins, attempts to access cloud drives I had already disabled. I wasn't watching her. I was cutting her off. Quietly, her devices started losing sync. Shared files disappeared. Passwords failed. Her recovery emails bounced. I watched her get frustrated one afternoon trying to log into our old Dropbox. "Must be a glitch," she muttered. I nodded. "Tech's a mess these days." She changed the subject. Then I pulled the plug on our joint phone plan. Transferred everything to my name and ported her number to a prepaid account, burner grade, with no data. She stormed into the kitchen that night, holding her phone like it was a dead pet. My service is down, she said. Can you check the account? I switched providers, I said smoothly. Better rates. Well, can you fix it? I already did, I replied. But the family plan was costing extra. You'll need to set up your own. She stared at me for a second, longer than usual. Something flickered behind her eyes. But she didn't ask questions. She was smart enough to know when to retreat. Later that night, I left a burner phone in the guest bedroom drawer with a note taped to it that read, "For emergencies only." I wanted her to think I was still trying. Still caring. Still naive. It worked. She thanked me with a kiss on the cheek the next morning. The next thread was professional. I contacted my company's internal audit team anonymously and asked them to look into confidential files that had been improperly accessed. I included a few document IDs, ones I'd seen in Naomi's secret folder. She had been reviewing sensitive materials, competitive bids, IP transfers, patent drafts, things she had no reason to even glance at, let alone copy. I made sure the audit included network access logs. Guess whose IP popped up? Evan's. Naomi had been feeding him information from my company. Not just for leverage, but for theft. They were planning to take what I had built and use it as their starting capital. It wasn't personal. It was strategy. But now I had the receipts. And the final thread? Reputation. I made sure a pristine, anonymous tip, detailed, documented, and backed by digital proof, landed on the desk of a local journalist who specialized in white-collar corruption. Just a quiet mention of misused corporate resources, shell companies, and falsified documents connecting Naomi and Evan. I knew it would take weeks to make it through vetting. That was fine. I wasn't in a hurry. The goal wasn't to nuke them from orbit. It was to collapse them internally without them knowing who pulled the wires. Like termites hollowing a house from within. One day, Naomi came home early from work. Said the company was going through a restructuring. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. A few days later, Evan's condo listing went offline. His company website redirected to an error page. I asked Naomi if she wanted to take a vacation. Just the two of us. She said she was feeling sick. Of course she was. By the end of the month, the dominoes had fallen. Naomi's corporate access had been suspended. Evan's debts were suddenly due. The apartment they had been sharing under that ridiculous alias was now flagged for foreclosure by the holding company that I now owned under a different shell. I bought it through a friend of Porter's. Silent transfer. No paper trail that led back to me. The moment they stopped paying rent, the eviction began. They had nowhere to go. Phones dead. Funds frozen. Credit lines closed. Contacts flagged. All they had left was each other. And they barely had that. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. An equal and opposite force. They took something real and tried to replace it with a fantasy. So I dismantled the fantasy. Piece by piece. Thread by thread.